A millionaire is moved when a single mother says, "I promise to pay you when I can." In the supermarket line, he expected just change, but heard a phrase that tore open an old regret. He paid for her groceries without thinking, but it was her gesture the next day that completely disarmed him. Unknowingly, that woman and her son would awaken in him something money had never been able to buy: belonging. Ryan Montgomery contemplated the view from the 20th floor of his apartment in Tribeca, New York City. The expanse of the Hudson River stretched out like an infinite blue canvas. But his eyes couldn't capture the beauty of the scene. There was something mechanical about the way he lived, waking up at 6 a.m., working out for an hour in the building's private gym, having coffee while reading the financial news, working remotely for his investment firm, eating dinner alone, and sleeping. An impeccable routine, with no surprises. The 2,200 square foot apartment was decorated in neutral tones, with expensive Italian furniture and contemporary art that an interior designer had chosen. Nothing there had a story or personal meaning. It was a residence that looked like it was straight out of an architecture magazine, perfectly tidy and absolutely impersonal. "Sir, dinner is served," announced Alina, the housekeeper who had worked for him for 5 years and still treated him as if he were a stranger. "Thank you, Elena. You can go home now." She nodded and left silently, leaving the meticulously prepared dinner on the dining room table. Ryan was in no hurry to eat. What awaited him afterward? A few more empty hours before bed. At 42, Ryan had built a financial empire, but no genuine connections. His marriage to Megan had lasted only 3 years. The separation had occurred without shouting or scandals, just the cold realization that he couldn't give her what she wanted most: children. His infertility, discovered during routine exams, had been like a sentence. "I want my own children, real children," Megan had said as she left, a phrase that still echoed off the apartment walls. On Friday, driven by an inexplicable boredom, Ryan decided to do something different: go to the grocery store himself. Normally, this would be a job for Elena, but a distant childhood memory of going shopping with his mother made him drive to a traditional market in Astoria, at Queens, far from his neighborhood, where the products weren't arranged with millimeter precision on the shelves. The Astoria Produce Market was an old establishment, with worn ceramic tile floors and a peculiar smell of spices and fresh bread. Ryan grabbed a basket, feeling out of place among families and elderly people who were shopping cheerfully. The buzz of voices, the occasional cry of a child, the employees announcing sales, it was all strangely comforting. While choosing a few items he didn't really need, he observed a woman in the checkout line. She must have been around 35, with curly hair tied back carelessly, a tired but beautiful face, a beauty without artifice. Next to her, a boy of about 8 years old watched everything with curious, bright eyes. Ryan noticed when the woman began to take some coins from her wallet, counting them carefully. He saw the exact moment she spoke to the cashier. "Please, I'm going to leave the cheese and this package of cookies," she said in a firm voice, without embarrassment, despite the people in line behind her. The boy didn't complain, just looked at the items that would be returned with a silent acceptance that didn't match his age. His eyes, however, lingered a little longer on the package of cookies. "We'll buy them next week, Matthew," she promised her son, running a hand through the boy's curly hair. Something stirred inside Ryan. A discomfort, a memory perhaps, of when his own mother, before his father made a fortune in construction, had to choose what to buy and what to leave on the market shelves. Without much thought, He approached the checkout counter. "You can put it all on my tab," he said, holding out his credit card to the cashier. The woman turned to him, surprised and suspicious. "That's not necessary. We're fine," she replied dryly. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend. It's just that ... But Ryan hesitated. "I've been there before. Someone helped me once. I'm just paying it forward." She studied him for a moment, her brown eyes evaluating every detail of his appearance, the expensive watch, the designer coat, the imported shoes. "I appreciate the gesture, but we don't accept charity," she answered firmly. The line was growing behind them. The boy tugged on his mother's shirt. "Mum, everyone's looking," he whispered. The cashier, an elderly woman, sighed impatiently. "Come on, Teresa, the young man is just trying to help. Let it go." Teresa, now he knew her name, hesitated. Then, with a dignity that impressed him, she gave a brief nod. "All right, but I'm going to pay you back. Every cent." Ryan just smiled and paid the bill, as Teresa put the groceries in her bag. Matthew looked at him and murmured a shy thank you. "I need your contact information to return the money," Teresa said as they left the market. "It's not necessary, really," Ryan tried to argue. "It's necessary for me," she replied, in a way that brooked no argument. "I have my principles." He admired that stance. He handed her a business card with his phone number. "Ryan Montgomery," she read aloud. "Montgomery Investments. Sounds important. It's just a job," he replied, suddenly feeling embarrassed by the ostentatious card with its raised gold lettering. The sky was darkening quickly, heralding a typical New York summer thunderstorm. Ryan noticed Teresa looking worriedly at the bus stop. "Can I offer you a ride?" he asked, gesturing to his car parked nearby. She shook her head. "No, thank you. I've accepted enough help for one day." The first drops began to fall, thick and heavy. "Mum, it's going to rain a lot," Matthew observed, looking at the dark sky. Teresa hesitated, clearly torn between her pride and her son's well-being. At that moment, thunder rumbled, and the rain intensified abruptly. Just as once, she relented, running with Matthew to Ryan's car. In the comfort of the imported vehicle, Teresa seemed even more out of place, sitting stiffly on the leather seat. Matthew, however, looked at everything with barely concealed fascination. "Where do you live?" Ryan asked, starting the car. "Astoria," she replied. "Ditmars Boulevard." The drive was mostly silent, broken only by Teresa's occasional directions and Matthew's curious questions about the car. "Are you rich, mister?" the boy asked suddenly. "Matthew!" Teresa scolded, embarrassed. Ryan laughed, a genuine laugh for the first time in a long time. "I'm comfortable," he answered the boy. "But that doesn't mean much." "How come?" Matthew questioned, confused. "If you have money, you can buy anything you want." Ryan glanced briefly at the boy in the rearview mirror. "Not everything can be bought, Matthew." Teresa watched Ryan with an enigmatic expression, as if seeing him for the first time. When they arrived at the indicated address, an old but well-maintained apartment building, the rain had subsided. Teresa took the bags and formally thanked him for the ride. "I remember your promise," she said before getting out. "I'll pay what I owe." Ryan nodded, knowing it would be useless to argue. As he watched the mother and son enter the building, he felt something strange, a lightness in his chest, a feeling that something important had just happened. It was just a simple gesture, paying for groceries, a ride in the rain. But for some reason he couldn't explain, those brief moments had been the most authentic he had lived in years. Back at his apartment in Tribeca, Ryan found Alina surprised that he had arrived with grocery bags. "Did you need something specific, sir?" she asked, confused. "No," he replied. realizing he had barely bought anything for himself. I just needed to get out for a bit. That night, he fell asleep thinking about Teresa and her son, about how, despite their evident struggles, they seemed to have something that he, with all his money, had not managed to find: dignity and purpose. 2 weeks passed without Ryan hearing from Teresa or Matthew. He was surprised to realize how often he thought of them, during virtual meetings with investors or while analyzing financial reports. His mind would drift to Teresa's determined expression or Matthew's curious eyes. There was something about that chance encounter that lingered, like a musical note that continues to vibrate even after the instrument is silent. On a rainy Wednesday, as he was finishing a video conference with clients from Chicago, his secretary announced over the intercom, "Mr. Montgomery, there's a woman named Teresa Riley in the reception. She doesn't have an appointment, but she insists on seeing you. She says it's a personal matter." Ryan's heart sped up inexplicably. "You can send her up, Claire." Teresa entered the office with the same dignified posture she had displayed at the grocery store. She wore simple clothes, jeans, a white shirt, and a well-maintained but visibly worn blazer. In her hands, she held a brown envelope. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," she said, standing at the entrance to the room. Ryan stood up to greet her. "No problem at all. Please have a seat." She looked around, clearly impressed by the spacious office with a view overlooking New York Harbor, but trying to hide it. She sat in the indicated chair, her posture erect, the envelope held firmly between her fingers. "I came to pay my debt," she announced, holding out the envelope. I counted every cent. Ryan felt a mix of admiration and discomfort. Those few dollars meant so little to him and so much to her. "You didn't have to bother, Teresa. I always keep my promises," she replied simply. "It's important that Matthew learns that too." He took the envelope, understanding that refusing it would be a form of disrespect. "How is Matthew?" Teresa's face softened at the mention of her son's name. "He's well. He's asked about you a few times." "About me?" Ryan smiled, surprised. "Yet, he was impressed with your car." She hesitated, as if choosing her words, "and with your gesture at the market. It's not common." "Well, for people like you to help people like us, people like me," Ryan repeated, feeling uncomfortable with the categorization. Teresa looked at him directly. Usually too busy to notice others. There was a frankness about Teresa that disarmed him. It wasn't resentment he saw in her eyes, just a statement of fact. "It was no big deal," he replied, embarrassed. "For you, maybe not. For us, it was." She stood up, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "Well, that's all. Thank you again, and I'm sorry to have taken up your time." "Wait," Ryan said, before he could think. "Do you have plans right now? Could we get a coffee?" Teresa frowned, clearly surprised by the invitation. "Why?" The direct question caught him off guard. Why, really? What did he want from this woman he barely knew? "Honestly, I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe because you're the most authentic person I've met in a very long time." She studied him for a few seconds, as if trying to decipher a complex puzzle. "I have to pick Matthew up from school in an hour," she finally replied. "But I can have a quick coffee." They went down to a coffee shop on the ground floor of the corporate building. It was an elegant place, frequented by executives and their business meetings. Ryan noticed how out of place Teresa seemed there, but also how she maintained her dignity, ignoring curious glances. "So," he began, after they had ordered, "what do you do, Teresa?" "I'm an English teacher at a public school, and I tutor at night," she answered. And I also do some freelance copy editing for a publisher when it comes up. 3 jobs? Matthew deserves a better life than the one I had, she said simply. And his father? Ryan ventured to ask. Teresa's face hardened slightly. He's not in the picture. He decided fatherhood wasn't for him when Matthew was 2. I'm sorry, don't be. We're better off this way. She took a sip of her coffee. And you? Besides investments, what do you do with your life? The question sounded strange to Ryan. No one had asked him that in years. His life was his work. I work, mostly, he answered, feeling how pathetic the response sounded as he said it. Is that all? Teresa raised an eyebrow. I travel occasionally. I read a lot. Yes, basically that. Family. Ryan hesitated. Divorce. No children. Something in the way he said the last part made Teresa watch him more closely. By choice. Not exactly. He rarely mentioned it, but he felt compelled to be honest with her. I have a medical condition. I can't have children. Teresa nodded, showing no pity or embarrassment. I understand. That must be difficult. It was the reason for the divorce, he added. Megan wanted real children, as she put it. Adoption wasn't an option for her. Real children, Teresa repeated, a hint of indignation in her voice. As if love has anything to do with biology. Her comment took Ryan by surprise. It was exactly what he had thought at the time, but he had never heard anyone else say it out loud. Matthew is the most precious thing I have, Teresa continued. I would give my life for him without a second thought. I didn't need to carry him for 9 months in my womb to feel that. Ryan looked at her, confused. Matthew isn't your biological son. Teresa smiled for the first time since she had arrived, a genuine smile that lit up her tired face. He's my nephew, my younger sister's son, who had complications during childbirth and... She hesitated, searching for the words, couldn't make it. The father disappeared even before he was born. I've raised him since day one. He is my son in every way, but on paper. Ryan felt a wave of admiration for the woman in front of him. That's ... incredible. It's nothing special. It's what anyone would do for someone they love. She looked at her watch. I need to go get Matthew now. Ryan signaled for the waiter, asking for the check. I can give you a ride. I have to leave for a meeting anyway. It was a lie, but he didn't want the moment to end so quickly. Teresa hesitated, but eventually accepted. In the car, the conversation flowed more easily. She told him about her work at the public school, the challenges and the small victories. She talked about Matthew, his school performance, his dream of becoming a scientist. When they arrived at the school, a public school in Astoria, Matthew was already waiting at the gate. His eyes widened when he saw Ryan's car. Aunt T, it's the man from the grocery store, he exclaimed, running toward the vehicle. Teresa got out to greet him with a hug. Yes, he kindly gave us a ride. Matthew got into the back seat, excited. Do you have games in your car? Miguel's dad's car has an iPad in the seat. Matthew, mind your manners, Teresa gently chided him. Ryan laughed. I don't have games, sorry. But there's a bottle of water and some chocolates in the glove compartment, if you want. The boy's eyes lit up. He looked at Teresa, silently asking for permission. Just one chocolate, she conceded. During the drive to their apartment, Matthew bombarded Ryan with questions about his job, his car, where he lived. Teresa tried to contain him, but Ryan answered everything with patience, charmed by the boy's curiosity. When they arrived, Teresa invited Ryan to come up, to his surprise. Just for a coffee, as a thank you for the ride, she explained. Unless you really have that meeting. Ryan smiled, appreciating that she had seen through his lie. The meeting can wait. The apartment was small, but organized and welcoming. Photos of Matthew at different ages decorated the walls. Books occupied every available space on shelves, stacked on tables, some even on the floor. "Sorry for the mess," Teresa said, removing books from a chair so he could sit. "English teacher, guilty as charged. I like it," Ryan replied honestly. "It feels like a real home." While Teresa prepared coffee in the small kitchen, Matthew appeared with a science book. "Do you know about black holes?" he asked Ryan, sitting down next to him. "I'm doing a school project," Ryan, who coincidentally had a fascination with astronomy, one of his few interests outside the financial world, began to explain the concept of the event horizon and gravitational singularity in a way the boy could understand. Teresa, returning with the coffee, stopped at the living room doorway, watching the scene. Ryan leaning over the book with Matthew, both engrossed in their conversation about the universe. There was something so natural about that image that she felt a pang in her chest, mixture of hope and fear that she couldn't name. In the following weeks, Ryan found himself visiting Teresa and Matthew's home with increasing frequency. At first, it was just occasional rides or help with Matthew's science project. Soon, these turned into impromptu dinners, Sunday outings to Central Park, and long conversations on the small balcony of Teresa's apartment after Matthew had gone to sleep. For Ryan, those simple moments represented a discovery, life beyond the glass walls of his Tribeca apartment and his luxurious downtown office. He watched, fascinated, as Teresa managed her home with limited resources, how she turned basic ingredients into delicious meals, how she balanced work, studies, and motherhood with a quiet determination. One Saturday afternoon, while Teresa was grading papers and Matthew was playing video games on an old console, Ryan realized he felt more at home in that modest apartment than in his own residence. "What are you thinking about?" Teresa asked, looking up from the papers scattered on the kitchen table. "You seem far away." Ryan smiled. "I was thinking about how strange this is. What is this us? This friendship?" Teresa put down her red pen. "Strange, why? Because you're rich and I'm not." "It's not just that," he replied, choosing his words. "It's more like I'm unlearning everything I thought I knew about life." Teresa studied him with her perceptive eyes. "And is that a good or a bad thing?" "Good, definitely good." Ryan paused. "You know, in my bubble, people measure success by the size of their bank account. Here, I see a different kind of wealth. Be careful not to romanticize us, Ryan," Teresa warned, a slight smile softening her words. "Not having money isn't poetic. It's hard. Every day." "I'm not romanticizing the struggle," he clarified. "I'm admiring your strength." Ryan's phone rang, interrupting the conversation. When he answered, his expression changed. It was Greg, his childhood friend and the firm's current lawyer, inviting him to a dinner that night. "It's important that you come," Greg insisted. "People are talking about your absence, and that investor from Dubai you wanted to impress will be there." Ryan hesitated, looking to Teresa and then at Matthew in the living room. "I don't know, Greg. I have other plans." "What plans could be more important than a $30 million deal?" Greg questioned impatiently. Cornered, Ryan ended up accepting. After hanging up, he explained the situation to Teresa. "It's work. I have to go," he said, feeling strangely guilty. "Of course," Teresa replied naturally. "You have a life, obligations. We would never expect you to spend every weekend here." Even so, when Ryan said goodbye to Matthew, the disappointment in the boy's eyes was evident. "I thought we were going to finish building the miniature solar system," he said, referring to the school project they were building together. "I promise we'll finish it tomorrow," Ryan assured him, ruffling the boy's hair affectionately. The restaurant chosen for the dinner was one of the most exclusive in the city. Located on the top floor of a 5-star hotel in the meatpacking district, the atmosphere was exactly what Ryan was used to. Strategic lighting, elegant furniture, impeccably dressed people discussing business or showing off expensive jewelry. Greg greeted him with a pat on the back and an extra dry martini. "Finally. I thought you'd fallen off the map. Where have you been?" "Busy. Personal projects," Ryan answered vaguely. "What personal projects?" "You've never had a life outside of work," Greg joked, leading him to a table where 3 other men were talking animatedly. The evening proceeded, like so many others in his previous life, discussions about the financial market, investment opportunities, new boats, international travel. Ryan participated mechanically, his mind occasionally drifting to Teresa grading papers at her kitchen table, or Matthew enthusiastically explaining why Pluto should be considered a planet again. "Ryan, are you listening to us?" asked Paulo Mendes, the investor from Dubai everyone was trying to impress. "Sorry, what were you saying?" Greg shot him a warning look. Paulo repeated his question about expanding into Asian markets. Ryan answered competently, but without the enthusiasm he would normally show. When the dinner ended and the preliminary contracts had been discussed, Greg held him by the arm as the others were leaving. "What's going on with you? You seemed a million miles away." Ryan sighed. "I'm just tired, that's all." Greg narrowed his eyes. "It's not just that. You've been different for weeks, cancelling appointments, not showing up to parties. Carl said he saw you in Central Park, with a woman and a child." "Who are they?" "Friends," Ryan answered defensively. "Friends?" Greg laughed, incredulous. "Since when do you have friends who aren't from our circle? Especially with kids." Irritation grew in Ryan. "What's the problem, Greg? Do I need your approval for my friendships now?" "Hey, calm down." Greg raised his hands in surrender. "I'm just worried about you. The last time I saw you like this was after the divorce. I don't want you getting involved with the wrong person out of neediness." "Neediness?" Ryan repeated, disbelievingly. "Come on, Ryan. A single mother with a kid. It's obvious what's happening. You've always wanted a family. Your ex couldn't give you that. Now you find a woman who's probably in need, a child who needs a father figure. It's the perfect scenario to confuse emotional neediness with love." Gregor's words hit a raw nerve. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been your friend for 30 years, Ryan." Greg lowered his voice, adopting a confidential tone. "Look, I'm not judging. If you want a little adventure outside our world, fine. Just don't fool yourself into thinking you can build something real with someone so different." Ryan wanted to argue, to defend Teresa, to explain how extraordinary she was, how brilliant Matthew was. But Greg's words planted a seed of doubt. Was that really it? Was he trying to fill the void left by his failed marriage and his inability to have children? On the way home, the doubt gnawed at him. He remembered Teresa's expression when she talked about Matthew not being her biological son, but being hers in every way that mattered. Was that what he was looking for? A ready-made family to compensate for what he couldn't have naturally? The next day, when he arrived at Teresa's apartment to finish Matthew's project, something had changed. Teresa noticed immediately. "Did something happen?" she asked when Matthew went to get the materials from his room. "No, nothing," Ryan replied, avoiding her gaze. Teresa didn't press, but the afternoon passed with a subtle tension. Ryan helped Matthew finish the miniature solar system, but his enthusiasm seemed forced. When they were done, he made an excuse not to stay for dinner. "You're acting strange," Teresa observed as she walked him to the door. "Just tired. The business dinner last night ended late. It's more than that," she insisted. "If you're getting tired of us, that's fine. Just be honest." Teresa's frankness disarmed him, as always. "It's not that. It's just ... double quotes." He hesitated. "Sometimes I wonder what I'm doing here. What we have in common." Teresa studied him for a long moment. "I see." Her voice was neutral, but her eyes betrayed her hurt. "You've finally noticed the social chasm between us." "It took you longer than I expected. It's not about money, isn't it?" Teresa challenged. "Then what is it? Because until yesterday, you seemed perfectly comfortable with us. Then you have dinner with people on your level, and today you're different." Ryan felt exposed, as if Teresa could read his thoughts. "It's not that simple." "Actually, it's very simple," she replied, crossing her arms. "You're having doubts about what you mean to us. You're afraid of being just a charity project that got out of hand. Or worse, you're worried I'm after your money." "No, I never thought that," Ryan protested. "Didn't you?" Teresa raised an eyebrow. "Then why this sudden questioning about what we have in common? Why the need to create distance?" Brian had no answer. Greg's words echoed in his mind, confusing neediness with love. Teresa sighed, softening her tone. "Look, Ryan, we enjoy your company. Matthew has grown attached to you. She hesitated. "I have to. But I have too much pride to beg for friendship or anything else. If you're having doubts about what this is, maybe it's best we take a break." "I don't want to take a break," he replied quickly. "I'm just confused." "About what, exactly?" "About my own feelings," he finally admitted. "Whether they're genuine, or if I'm just ... filling a void." Teresa completed, perceptive as ever. Ryan nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "I understand," Teresa said, softer now. "You need to figure that out on your own. And we need to protect ourselves." "Protect yourselves?" "From me?" "From expectations," she clarified. "Matthew has already lost too many important figures in his life. I can't let him get attached to someone who isn't sure if they want to stay." The words hit Ryan like a punch. Teresa was right, of course. He had no right to drift in and out of their lives according to his doubts and conveniences. "I'll call you," he said finally. "When you're ready," Teresa replied. No rush. Ryan felt the weight of that door closing behind him. In the elevator, he had the sensation of abandoning something precious, but the confusion in his mind didn't allow for clarity. Maybe Greg was right. Maybe he was just confusing neediness with something deeper. On the way home, he decided he needed space to think. Perhaps a temporary separation would clear his head. Little did he know that fate had other plans, and that the answer to his doubts would come in a way he could never have foreseen. 3 days had passed since his conversation with Teresa. 3 days in which Ryan immersed himself in work, trying to drown out the unsettling feeling that consumed him. Greg's words and Teresa's hurt expression alternated in his mind as he tried to convince himself that distance was the wisest course of action. On a Thursday night, while analyzing reports in his home office, his phone rang. Teresa's number appeared on the screen, sending a wave of simultaneous anxiety and relief through him. "Teresa," he answered, trying not to sound overly eager. "Ryan ... Her voice was different, shaky. "I need your help." He sat up straight in his chair, instantly on alert. "What happened?" "It's Matthew. He has a very high fever, 103 degrees. He's having trouble breathing." Teresa's voice broke. I tried to get a taxi, but with this storm, none will take the fare. My neighbor with a car is out of town. Where are you? Ryan was already grabbing his keys and wallet. At home. I don't know what to do. But vulnerability in Teresa's usually controlled voice alarmed him even more. I'm on my way. 20 minutes tops, he promised, running to the garage. The night was indeed terrible. A summer thunderstorm had turned the streets of New York into small rivers, with traffic at a virtual standstill in some areas. Ryan maneuvered through the congestion with determination, ignoring red lights when possible, taking shortcuts he would normally avoid. When he arrived at Teresa's building, he was soaked just from the short dash from the car to the entrance. He ran up the stairs, not waiting for the elevator. Teresa opened the door before he even knocked, as if she'd been watching for his arrival from the window. Thank God, she murmured, pulling him inside. Matthew was on the sofa, wrapped in blankets, his pale skin contrasting with fever-flushed cheeks. His usually vibrant eyes were dull, and his breath came in painful gasps. "Hey, chump." Ryan knelt beside him, trying to sound calm, despite the panic he felt, seeing the boy in that state. Matthew tried to smile, but the effort seemed exhausting. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I came," Ryan replied, a lump forming in his throat. He turned to Teresa. "How long has he been like this?" "It started with a cough yesterday, but it got drastically worse in the last few hours," she explained, wringing her hands. "I gave him fever reducer, but it's not coming down." Ryan nodded, already lifting Matthew into his arms. The boy was so light, so vulnerable. "We're going to the hospital. Now." Teresa grabbed a pre-packed bag and followed Ryan to the car. The rain continued relentlessly, making the simple act of placing Matthew in the back seat a challenge. Teresa sat next to her son, holding his hand, while Ryan drove as fast as conditions allowed. "Which hospital are we going to?" Teresa asked, her voice still trembling. "Mount Sinai. I have a plan there. We'll be seen immediately." Teresa nodded silently. This was no time for pride or arguments about privilege. At the hospital, as promised, the Montgomery name opened doors. Within minutes, Matthew was taken to an examination room, with Teresa by his side. Ryan remained in the waiting room, wet and disheveled, a stark contrast to the sterile, orderly environment. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor appeared to speak with Evans, a middle-aged man with a serious but kind expression. "Pneumonia," he diagnosed. "Fortunately, we've caught it in the early stages. We'll start intravenous antibiotics immediately and keep him for observation tonight." Teresa covered her mouth with her hands, as if trying to stifle a sob. "Is he going to be okay?" "With the proper treatment, yes," the doctor assured her. "Children have a remarkable ability to recover. But it was good you came in when you did. Pneumonia can escalate quickly." Ryan put an arm round Teresa's shoulders, and to his surprise, she didn't pull away. "Can we see him?" "Of course. We're preparing a room. One companion can stay, but only one." Teresa looked at Ryan. "You should go home, change out of those wet clothes. You've done so much for us today." "I'm not going anywhere," Ryan replied firmly. "Unless you'd rather I leave." Teresa studied his face for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I'm glad you're here." They were taken to the room where Matthew would be admitted. The boy was already connected to An 4 and a vital signs monitor, looking even smaller in the hospital bed. "I'll get you some coffee," Ryan offered to Teresa, who had sat in the chair by the bed, still holding her son's hand. When he returned with 2 cups of coffee, he found Teresa bent over the bed, crying silently. She quickly wiped her eyes when she noticed him. "Sorry," she murmured. "I'm usually stronger than this." Ryan placed the coffees on the side table and came closer. "Being strong doesn't mean you don't cry, Teresa. It's just ... quotes. She took a deep breath. "I promised myself I would take care of him, that nothing bad would happen. When my sister gave me Matthew, I swore I would protect him from everything. And you do," Ryan assured her. "You're amazing with him. Then why didn't I realize it was serious? Why did I wait so long to bring him?" The guilt in her voice was palpable. "You didn't wait. You brought him as soon as you realized it was serious. And the doctor said we caught it in time." Teresa didn't seem convinced. "I should have noticed sooner. But I was so worried about the bills, about the papers, to grade ... Stop," Ryan said firmly, crouching down to be at her level. "You're an extraordinary mother. Matthew is lucky to have you." Teresa's eyes met his, filled with vulnerability and something else, a trust he wasn't sure he deserved. "Thank you for being here," she said softly. The hours dragged on. Matthew slept, occasionally waking up confused, but always calming down when he saw Teresa. Ryan left, only to get clean clothes for both of them and a few essential items Teresa listed. On the second night in the hospital, with Matthew already responding well to the antibiotics, Teresa finally succumbed to exhaustion. Ryan found her sleeping uncomfortably in the chair next to the bed. Carefully, he draped his own coat over her shoulders and took over the vigil. Sitting in the dim light of the hospital room, watching the boy sleep and the exhausted woman beside him, Ryan felt a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. All the doubts that had plagued him, all the insecurities about his feelings, dissolved like mist in the sun. He wasn't there out of guilt, charity, or to fill a void. He was there because these 2 people had become essential to him, in a way that no $1 million contract, no luxury car, no apartment with a river view ever could be. The mere thought of not having them in his life caused a physical ache. When dawn broke, Teresa woke with a start, momentarily disoriented. "Good morning," Ryan smiled, offering her a freshly bought coffee. "You stayed here all night?" she asked, accepting the drink. "Someone had to watch over you too." Teresa looked at her son, still asleep, but with color already returning to his face. "He's better." "Yes. The doctor came by at 5 a.m., said the fever broke completely, and his breathing is almost normal." The relief on Teresa's face was visible. "Thank God." Teresa ... began, feeling it was time for the conversation they had postponed. "About what happened before, my doubts ... double quotes." She raised a hand, interrupting him. "We don't have to talk about that now." "Yes, we do," he insisted gently, "because I don't have any doubts anymore." Teresa looked at him, a mixture of hope and caution. "These last few days ... double quotes," Ryan continued, choosing his words carefully. "They've been the scariest of my life, but also the most clarifying. When I saw Matthew sick, when I saw your fear, I realized that you aren't a project, you're not a way to fill a void. You're so much more than that." Ryan ... "Let me finish," he requested. "For years I lived a life that looked perfect on the outside but was completely empty. Then I found you, and I discovered what's really important. It's not money, it's not status. It's this. It's being there when someone needs you. It's feeling like I make a difference to people who matter." Teresa blinked rapidly, pushing back tears. "You really do. I know we have differences. I know. I come from a different world than you do, but that matters less than what we've built together." Ryan took a deep breath. "I love you both." It's as simple and as complex as that. It was the first time he had used the word love, and he felt its weight, its absolute truth. Teresa watched him for a long time, as if searching for any sign of hesitation. "This isn't the time to make big decisions," she finally said. "We're emotionally exhausted. You might regret what you're saying." "I won't," Ryan stated with conviction. "But I understand your caution. We can talk when all this is over, when Matthew was home and recovered." Teresa nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. "I'd like that." At that moment, Matthew woke up, his eyes finding Ryan's immediately. "You didn't leave," the boy observed, his voice still hoarse. Ryan moved closer to the bed, holding the small, warm hand. "No, and I'm not going to." On the third day, Dr. Evans authorized Matthew's discharge. "Continue with the oral antibiotic for another 7 days. Rest, plenty of fluids, and a follow-up next week." As they prepared to leave, a hospital administrator approached with paperwork. "Miss Riley, we need to settle the administrative side before discharge." Teresa nodded, already reaching for her purse. "Yes, of course. I can make an initial payment today and set up a plan for the rest." The employee looked confused. "There's no need. The bill has already been settled." Teresa looked at Ryan, who was studying the ceiling with sudden interest. "What do you mean, settled?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Mr. Montgomery took care of everything last night. Hospital, medication, all included." Teresa waited until they were alone to confront him. "Why did you do that?" Ryan met her gaze. "Because I could. Because I wanted to. That's single quotes s dot dot double quotes." She searched for the word dot 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 humiliating. "How can helping someone I love be humiliating?" he questioned, genuinely confused. "You didn't have to do it behind my back. We could have talked about it. I could have paid it off over time." Ryan realized his mistake. It wasn't about the money. It never was. "I should have talked to you first." It was about dignity, about Teresa choice. Shook her head, visibly hurt. "You don't get it, do you? To you, it's just money. To me, it's about not feeling dot 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 inferior." "I've never thought of you as inferior," Ryan protested. "Not consciously, maybe." Teresa adjusted the bag on her shoulder. "But this gesture, paying in secret, it shows you still see our relationship as a dynamic of charity, not equality." Ryan wanted to argue, but he realized she was right. Even with the best intentions, he had acted with the unconscious arrogance of privilege. "You're right," he admitted. "Forgive me." Teresa's expression softened slightly at his admission. "Let's go home. Matthew needs to rest." Ryan knew in the car he had made a significant mistake, heavy, just when he thought everything was falling into place. When they arrived at the apartment, he helped settle Matthew comfortably in his room and then headed for the door. "I'll call later to see how he's doing," he told Teresa. She nodded, but her expression remained distant. "Thank you for everything, Ryan, really. But I need some time." "Time?" The word landed like a stone in his stomach. "To think, to process all of this. The last few days have been too intense." Ryan wanted to protest, to argue that there was nothing to process, that his feelings were clear. But he respected Teresa too much to push. "I understand," he said finally. "I'll be here when you're ready to talk." Teresa closed the door gently after he left. Ryan stood in the hallway for a moment, feeling that, despite all the revelations of the past few days, something precious was slipping through his fingers. A week passed since Matthew's discharge, a week in which Ryan respected Teresa's request for space, limiting himself to daily texts, asking about the boy's health. The replies were polite, but brief clinical updates without the warmth that had marked their previous interactions. In his Tribeca apartment, Ryan felt like a stranger. The rooms that once seemed elegant now felt empty, impersonal. He roamed the apartment like a ghost, unable to find comfort on the expensive sofas or pleasure in the spectacular view. At the firm, Greg noticed his distraction. "Still in this phase?" he asked during a board meeting. "I thought you were over your little suburban detour." Ryan stared at him coldly. "Don't talk about things you don't understand." Greg raised his eyebrows, surprised by his friend's unusual sharpness. "Hey, I'm just concerned. You're scattered, distant. The Dubai deal almost slipped through our fingers last week. There are more important things than deals," Ryan replied, putting his documents in his briefcase. "Like what?" Greg challenged. "A school teacher from the outer boroughs and her adopted kid. Be realistic, Ryan. What do you really have in common with them? What could you possibly offer besides money?" The words hit a sensitive spot. It was exactly what Teresa had implied, that he saw her as someone to be helped, not as an equal. "You don't know her," he said finally. "I don't need to. I've seen this movie before." Greg adjusted his expensive tie. "Remember Maurice? Left his wife for his secretary and her kid. 2 years later he was divorced again, but with a massive alimony payment. Teresa's not like that. They never are. Until they are." Greg softened his tone. "Look, I'm not saying she's a gold digger, but different people have different expectations from life. You might be in love with the idea of simplicity and authenticity now, but eventually you're going to miss your world." Ryan wanted to refute him, to explain how he felt more alive in the small Astoria apartment than at any gala or executive meeting. But Greg's words, combined with Teresa's prolonged silence, planted seeds of insecurity. On the 10th day of their separation, Ryan couldn't take it anymore. He needed to see her, to clear the air. He drove to the public school where Teresa taught, arriving as the students were being dismissed. He sat in his car, watching the gate, feeling both anxious and ridiculous. When Teresa finally appeared, carrying stacks of books and notebooks, his heart sped up. She was beautiful, even visibly tired, with her hair in a makeshift bun and simple clothes. Ryan got out of the car and walked toward her. "Teresa." She stopped, surprised. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" "I needed to see you," he replied simply. "Can we talk?" Teresa looked around, aware of the curious glances from colleagues and students. "Now is not a good time. Please, 5 minutes." Something in his tone must have communicated urgency, because she reluctantly nodded. "I need to pick up Matthew from the neighbor's house first. I can give you a ride." Teresa agreed, and they walked in silence to the car. A few blocks away, they stopped in front of a small townhouse where an elderly woman was waiting with Matthew. The boy, now recovered from pneumonia, lit up when he saw Ryan. "Uncle Ryan," he exclaimed, running to hug him. "You disappeared." Ryan felt a lump in his throat as he hugged the boy. "I've been busy, champ, but I've thought about you every day." Teresa thanked the neighbor, Mrs. Diaz, and they got in the car. Matthew immediately dominated the conversation, talking about school, the medicine he was still taking, and the drawings he had made for Ryan during his absence. When they arrived at the apartment, Teresa asked Matthew to go take a shower, creating an opportunity for them to talk. "How are you?" Ryan asked, when they were finally alone in the small living room. "Fine. Busy with the end of the semester." "And you?" "Terrible," he admitted honestly. Teresa studied him, surprised by his frankness. "Why?" "Because I miss you. Both of you." Ryan took a deep breath. I know I messed up by paying the hospital bill without talking to you. It was presumptuous and insensitive, but, Teresa, that doesn't change how I feel." She sat down in the worn armchair, looking suddenly exhausted. "It's not just about the hospital bill, Ryan. It's about reality." "What reality?" "The reality of who we are, of the different worlds we live in." She gestured around the modest apartment. "This is my life, working 3 jobs, counting pennies at the end of the month, fighting for every small achievement. Your life is completely different. So what?" Ryan challenged. "Why does that matter so much?" "Because eventually it will matter to you," Teresa exclaimed, frustration evident in her voice. "Right now, it seems romantic, different. But what about when the novelty wears off? When you get tired of eating dinner at a Formica table, of not being able to travel on vacation, of hearing about bills that need paying?" Ryan moved closer, sitting on the sofa across from her. "I don't care about any of that. Not now," she agreed. "But what about in a year, 2? I've been through this before, Ryan. Not with a man as rich as you, but with someone who initially found my fighting spirit and authenticity charming. Do you know when the charm wore off? When reality set in? When he realized that authenticity doesn't pay the bills?" "Don't compare me to him," Ryan protested. "I'm not. But I have Matthew to think about. He's already attached to you. Can't let him get hurt when you inevitably realize you belong in your world, not ours." Ryan felt a growing frustration. "Why are you so determined to predict failure? Why can't we just try?" Teresa stared at him for a long moment. "Because I'm scared," she finally admitted, her voice almost a whisper. "I'm afraid of falling even more in love with you and then losing you." The confession hung in the air between them. It was the first time either of them had openly acknowledged the nature of their feelings. "Teresa," Ryan began, choosing his words carefully, "I'm scared too. Scared I'm not enough for you. Not for what I can give you materially, but for who I am. Scared that my inability to have children will eventually become a problem. Scared that one day you'll look at me and see just an empty man trying to buy affection." "I've never thought of you like that," Teresa interrupted. "I know. And I've never thought of you as inferior for having less money. But we're both letting old fears, wounds from other relationships, dictate our future." Teresa didn't respond immediately. The silence was broken by Matthew, returning from his shower in dinosaur pajamas. "Is Uncle Ryan having dinner with us?" he asked hopefully. Teresa and Ryan exchanged glances. "If your mum allows it," Ryan answered cautiously. To his surprise and relief, Teresa nodded. "I'll make something simple." The dinner passed with a normalcy that warmed Ryan's heart. Matthew dominated the conversation, telling stories from school, asking questions about work, stars, dinosaurs, everything that crossed his curious mind. After they put Matthew to bed, with the promise that Ryan would return the next day, they went back to the living room. The mood had shifted, the earlier tension partially dissipated by the simplicity of the family dinner. "He missed you," Teresa commented, clearing the last of the plates. "I missed him too. And you?" Teresa watched him from the kitchen. "What do you really want, Ryan? From us, from all of this?" The question was simple, but profound. Ryan knew his answer would define the course of everything that followed. "I want to be a part of your lives," he answered with sincerity. "Not as a benefactor, not as a substitute father figure, but as a partner. Your partner. I want to build something real, Teresa, even if it's complicated. Even if we have to navigate our differences. And what if it doesn't work? What if it does?" he countered. "What if we find out that the differences between our worlds are less important than what we have in common. Isn't that a risk worth taking? Teresa smiled. Maybe. Look, I'm not asking for guarantees, Ryan continued. I'm just asking for a chance. A real one, without either of us waiting for it to fail. Teresa dried her hands on a dish towel, slowly approaching him. It won't be easy. People will talk. Your friends, my colleagues, let them talk. Your company, ... It's my company, Ryan interrupted. Who cares what they think about my personal life? Teresa smiled, more relaxed now. I learn from the best, he joked, relieved to see her smile. She moved closer, until they were inches apart. We still have a lot to talk about. It's a lot of details to work out, and we'll have time for that, Ryan promised. No rush. For a moment they stood there, close but not touching, the air between them charged with possibilities. Then, gently, Ryan held her face and kissed her. A soft, hesitant kiss, like a question. Teresa responded, her arms wrapping around him, turning the question into an answer. When they pulled apart, they were both smiling. Does this mean I can come back tomorrow? Ryan asked. This means you can come back tomorrow, Teresa confirmed. That night, as he returned to his apartment in Tribeca, Ryan felt strangely energized. For months, that place had been a space of silent loneliness, of absence. Now it was just a place to sleep before returning to where his heart truly was. As he was getting ready for bed, his phone buzzed. A text from Teresa, "Good night. Matthew asked if you could bring a book about stars tomorrow. Apparently, he wants to be an astronomer now, not a scientist." Ryan smiled, typing his reply. Tell him I'll bring the best book on stars I can find. Good night, Teresa. He slept with a serenity he hadn't experienced in years. The doubts hadn't completely vanished, the challenges still existed, but for the first time. The future seemed full of promise instead of emptiness. What Ryan didn't know was that fate still had one more surprise in store for him, one that would test, once and for all, the depth and truth of the feelings he held for Teresa and Matthew. The following weeks brought a new routine for Ryan, Teresa, and Matthew. Slowly, their relationship deepened, rooting itself in shared moments. Ryan divided his time between his work at the firm and late afternoons at Teresa's house, where he helped Matthew with homework, had dinner with them, and occasionally slept on the sofa when his conversations with Teresa stretched late into the night. One Saturday morning, as the three of them were having breakfast in Teresa's small kitchen, Matthew asked a question that caught the adults by surprise. "Uncle Ryan, are you going to live with us one day?" Teresa choked on her coffee, while Ryan looked at her, equally surprised. They hadn't discussed this yet, despite their growing closeness. "Matthew, that's not something you just ask like that," Teresa gently chided him. "Why not?" "Lucas's mum lives with her boyfriend," the boy argued with impeccable child logic. Ryan smiled, recovering from the initial shock. "That's a good question, Matthew. I would like to, someday. But that's a decision your mum and I need to make together when the time is right." Teresa looked at him, a mix of surprise and gratitude in her eyes for how he handled the situation. "That would be cool," Matthew concluded, turning his attention back to his pancakes. "You could take me to school every day, and we could get a dog. Mum always says we can't get a dog because she doesn't have time to take care of it. But if you lived here, ... Matthew," Teresa interrupted, laughing despite her embarrassment. "Finish your breakfast." Later, when Matthew went to play in his room, Teresa turned to Ryan. "Sorry about that. He has no filter. You don't have to apologize. It was a valid question." Ryan hesitated. "And you? What do you think of the idea? Teresa sighed, placing her mug on the table. I think it's too soon to think about that. We've only been together for 2 months. I know, he agreed. But I can't deny I've been thinking about the future. About the 3 of us. Teresa studied him for a moment. Oi, Anne. I need to be completely honest. I'm still scared, not of you, but of the situation. This apartment, this life. It's so different from what you're used to. We've discussed this, Ryan reminded her gently. The differences don't matter to me. Maybe they don't matter now. But Teresa, he interrupted, taking her hands. I know it's hard to believe, but I've never been happier than I am right now, with you two. My life before was ... empty. Too quiet. Too perfect, in a suffocating way. Here there's life, noise, imperfection, reality. She smiled, squeezing his hands. Even so, let's take it slow. For Matthew's sake especially. He's already so attached to you. ... I'm attached to him too, Ryan admitted. More than I ever thought possible. The following Monday, Ryan arrived at the office to find Greg waiting in his room, flipping through documents with a tense expression. We need to talk, he announced without preamble. The Dubai deal is in jeopardy. Ryan frowned, taking the papers. What do you mean? It was practically closed. It was, until information about your new lifestyle leaked. Greg adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. Paulo Mendes saw you at the mall with your alternative family. He got curious, asked around. You know how the corporate world works. People talk. So what? Ryan challenged. What does my personal life have to do with business? Everything. When you're dealing with conservative investors like the Arabs, they value stability, tradition. A divorced executive is already not ideal, but one involved in Greg hesitated. An unconventional situation raises questions about your seriousness, your commitment. Ryan felt anger rising. My unconventional situation has names, Teresa and Matthew, and I don't see how my relationship with them affects my ability to run this company. Look, Greg sighed. I'm not judging, really. I'm just reporting the facts. Paulo suggested it would be better to ... be discreet. At least until the contract is signed. Discreet? Ryan repeated slowly. What exactly does that mean? Just avoid appearing in public. It's not too much for a few weeks, considering what's at stake. Ryan stared at his friend, incredulous. Are you asking me to hide Teresa and Matthew as if there's something to be ashamed of? That's not what I said, Greg protested. It's just a strategic, temporary measure. Ryan stood up, feeling a sudden clarity. You know, Greg, I spent years believing that success was measured by the numbers in a bank account. That respect came from multi-million-dollar contracts and peer recognition. Only now do I realize how wrong I was. Ryan, don't be dramatic. It's just business. No, Ryan answered firmly. It's my life, my family. If Paulo Mendes or any other investor can't separate my professional competence from my personal choices, then maybe they aren't the partners we want. Greg stared at him, dumbfounded. You're willing to throw away a $30 million deal for a woman you met a few months ago and a boy who isn't even her son. Her son in every way that matters, Ryan corrected automatically. Then a realization hit him, and you know what? Yes. I am willing to give up any contract that requires me to deny the most important parts of my life, right now. Greg shook his head, surrendering. You've changed. Yes, Ryan agreed. Thank God. That evening, Ryan arrived early at Teresa's apartment, bringing food for dinner. He found her grading papers at the kitchen table, reading glasses on the tip of her nose, her hair tied back carelessly. The sight filled him with certainty. "Did something happen?" Teresa asked, noticing his expression. "Yes," he replied, sitting across from her. "I realized something important today." He told her about the conversation with Greg, the pressure to hide them, his refusal. Teresa listened intently, her expression shifting from concern to indignation, and finally to a quiet kind of admiration. "You didn't have to do that," she said when he finished. "I would have understood if you needed to be discreet for a while. It's not like we're attending social events anyway." "It's not about social events," Ryan explained. "It's about principles, about who I am now. I won't pretend that you are less important than any business deal." Teresa watched him for a long moment. "You really have changed. For the better, I hope." She smiled, removing her glasses. "Definitely for the better." It was at that moment that Matthew burst through the door, returning from a tutoring session with the neighbor. Seeing Ryan, he ran to hug him, a gesture that had become a ritual. "Uncle Ryan, I got a perfect score on my science test," he exclaimed, proudly showing a paper. "That's incredible, champ." Ryan lifted him into his arms, even though the boy was getting too big for it. "We have to celebrate. How about ice cream after dinner?" "Yes," Matthew cheered, running to put his things away. Teresa approached Ryan. "You're spoiling him." "A little," Ryan admitted, smiling. "But he deserves it." Teresa hesitated, then spoke. "I've been thinking about what Matthew asked, about you living with us." Ryan's heart sped up. "And maybe it's not such a premature idea after all." She smiled shyly. "I mean, you already spend more time here than in your own apartment." "That's true," he agreed, trying to contain his rising hope. "Are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we talk seriously about it. About the future." She took a deep breath. "Because, Ryan, I'm also realizing something important. I don't want to waste any more time fearing what might go wrong, when what we have right now is so right." Ryan pulled her to him, hugging her with intensity. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you both more than anything." "I love you too," she replied, the simple words carrying the weight of all the barriers she had torn down to say them. 3 months later, the Tribeca apartment was put up for sale. Ryan officially moved into the Astoria apartment, bringing only the essentials: books, clothes, a few personal items. The rest was donated or sold. The transition was not without its challenges. The limited space required adjustments. Their routines had to align. There were discussions about money. Ryan wanted to contribute more. Teresa insisted on an equal division of responsibilities. They reached a compromise. Part of the money from the sale of the apartment would be used to buy a more spacious one, still in Astoria, not far from Matthew's school. In the corporate world, Ryan faced consequences. The Dubai contract was cancelled, as Greg had predicted. Some investors pulled away, uncomfortable with his new priorities. But to his surprise, others approached, entrepreneurs who valued his authenticity, his clarity of purpose. The company transformed, just as he had. One Sunday afternoon, 6 months after he had moved in, Ryan found himself on the balcony of their new apartment, watching Teresa and Matthew in the building's common area. They had just adopted a dog, rescued caramel-colored mutt, that Matthew was trying to teach to fetch a ball. "Dad, look at Rocket," Matthew yelled, referring to the dog by its chosen name. Ryan froze, the word echoing in his ears. Dad. It was the first time Matthew had called him that. It had always been Uncle Ryan, even after he moved in. The transition to Dad hadn't been discussed or planned. It just happened, as natural as breathing. Teresa looked up, meeting his eyes. She had heard it too. She smiled, a smile that communicated her understanding of the moment's magnitude. Ryan quickly went downstairs to join them. When he reached the courtyard, Matthew ran toward him. "Dad, Rocket doesn't get the game," he complained, not seeming to notice the change in how he'd addressed him. "He just stares at the ball." "He'll learn," Ryan assured him, his voice slightly choked up. "He just needs time." Teresa came over, lacing her fingers with his. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly, as Matthew turned his attention back to the dog. Ryan nodded, unable to express in words the emotion he felt. "Perfect," he managed to say finally. That night, after Matthew had fallen asleep, Ryan and Teresa sat on the balcony, sharing a glass of wine. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with mutual understanding. "Did you hear what he called me today?" Ryan finally asked. "I heard," Teresa smiled. "It was spontaneous, natural. I never thought I'd hear that word directed at me," Ryan admitted. "After the diagnosis, the divorce, I thought that door was closed forever." Teresa took his hand. "Family isn't defined by blood, Ryan. It never has been. Family is who we choose to love, who we choose to protect, who we choose to be." "I know that now," he replied, squeezing her hand. "Thanks to you too." They remained there, watching the city lights, the starry sky over New York. 2 years earlier, Ryan Montgomery was a man who had everything money could buy, but whose life was defined by absences of purpose, of connection, of love. Now, in a modest apartment in Astoria, with a mutt snoring on the living room rug and a boy who had called him Dad sleeping in the next room, he had discovered a wealth that no bank account could measure. "What are you thinking about?" Teresa asked, noticing his smile. "About how unpredictable life is," he answered honestly. "About how sometimes we find exactly what we need, even without knowing we were looking for it." Teresa smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you decided to pay for my groceries that day at the market. Best investment I ever made," Ryan joked, kissing the top of her head. And it was true. All the bank accounts, all the multi-million-dollar contracts, all the luxury apartments in the world were not worth the moment Matthew had called him Dad, or the feeling of Teresa falling asleep in his arms after a long day. Some people spend their entire lives accumulating material wealth, only to discover that the real treasure lies in human connections, in the daily choices of love and presence. Ryan had been one of them, a man rich in possessions, poor in meaning. Now he finally understood what truly mattered. And so, without ceremony or grand declarations, a family was born. Not by the coincidence of DNA or the chance of birth, but by the conscious choice of 3 people who decided to belong to one another. A family defined not by what it lacked, biological ties, legal documents, but by what it possessed in abundance: love, respect, acceptance. A love that needed no justification or explanation. A love that, quite end simply, of story, dear listeners. We hope the story of Ryan, Teresa, and Matthew has touched your heart and shown that family goes far beyond blood ties. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other incredible stories of love and overcoming adversity. Find it by clicking here on the side. If this narrative sparks something in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Every day, we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the beauty of the encounters that transform us. Share in the comments if you have ever lived or witnessed a story of a family formed by the heart, not by blood. Your experience can inspire many people.